Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio In, and today we are going to be taking a look at the Kinera Freya 2.0. And I have owned and reviewed several of Kinera's IEMs on this channel. I think the last IEM I reviewed that was officially released under the Kinera brand was the Erd, and I believe that was about a year ago. If I'm not counting the Celeste or QOA releases, because I have recently also reviewed the Aviation and Phoenix Call. Now, many of their releases have been absolutely great. I really liked the Nano 2.0 and the Erd, but to be honest, sometimes Kinera can be a little hit and miss when it comes to tuning or technical performance. Regardless though, as usual, I'm always excited for their new releases, and the Freya 2.0 is absolutely no exception. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. One thing Kinera always does very well and consistently is create beautiful designs and top-notch presentations, regardless of the price range. From the design of the box and the case to the design of the IEMs and cable, it seems like they just nail it every single time. And they're also very generous with tips and accessories. Speaking of which, included in the box are the IEMs and cable. Of course, they also include a very cool case, a cleaning tool, lots of great tips, including some Final Type E tips, which are excellent. There's also a tip holder, and since the cable is modular, they also include both an interchangeable 3.5 single-ended and a 4.4 balance termination. And as for the price, specifications, and design, the Freya 2.0 comes in at $269 and has a hybrid driver configuration consisting of 3 Knowles balanced armature drivers and 1 dynamic driver. Now, as for the design, the faceplate is absolutely stunning. And if you'll notice, the rest of the shell isn't actually completely clear. If you look closely, you'll see that some of the swirl design on the faceplate actually carries through into the rest of the shell, which is a very nice touch. The cable quality and design is also excellent at this price. The cable matches the aesthetics of the IEMs very nicely, and while it's not necessarily the softest cable I've seen at this price, it is soft enough, but more importantly, it feels durable and it is quite easy to manage overall as far as rolling it up and storing it in the case. And again, I love that the cable is modular and has swappable 3.5 and 4.4 terminations. And as far as the comfort and fit, the shells are what I would consider to be on the smaller side. Some might consider them to be medium, depending on your ear size. Either way, they fit my ears fine. I had no issues with discomfort at all. And I also had no issues achieving a proper fit and still using the Final Type E tips. Okay, let's move on to the sound. Okay, let's talk about the sound of the Freya 2.0. So the sound signature is what I would consider to be V-shaped, so an emphasis on bass and upper mids, but not so much on the treble. As a matter of fact, it seems to be lacking in treble energy in general, but I'll save that for the sound breakdown. But again, we have a fairly decent amount of energy that is concentrated or focused on the bass and the upper mids. And while I do feel like it's relatively balanced, I don't really feel like I'm getting quite enough treble energy to offset the bass fully. But to break things down a little further, starting with the bass. So we have a 7mm dynamic driver that's handling the bass on the Freya 2.0. And if you know me, you know I love my dynamic driver bass. It may not give you the best speed, but what the Freya 2.0 does deliver is great dynamics, really nice amounts of punch, and excellent extension. And as far as bass energy, it is a little more than I would prefer, at least in the mid bass, but it's not so much as to overwhelm the upper mids. Maybe a little bit in the treble, but not the upper mids. So it's going to give you a little more of a warm presentation, but vocals and instruments still have good energy, and they have enough space to kind of cut through. And then as you move out of the bass into the lower mids, much of that energy carries right on through into the lower mids as well, which again, it brings a nice amount of warmth and richness. However, with that, it does also introduce some bass bleed in the lower mids, and you are going to lose a little bit of that low mid-range detail and clarity. So there is a little bit of a trade-off there, but things do clear up as you move up into the mids and upper mids, especially the upper mids, because you have a fairly substantial amount of energy from about 3K all the way up to 8K. And again, because of that energy, it allows vocals and instruments that land within that area to keep the listener's attention and maintain a fairly strong center focus, which is what you want. And one other thing I need to point out is that the way they transitioned from the mids into the upper mids, they were able to maintain pretty decent vocal and instrument naturalness. So they did a great job with the tuning of the mid-range in general. Again, vocals and instruments sound very natural. They maintain that center focus, male vocals, and again, some instruments that land in those low mids have good note weight and a little richness and warmth to their presentation. Now, moving on to the treble, this is where I started having some minor issues with the tuning after 8K because we have a little less treble energy than I would like to hear. It is there, but in terms of the amount of treble energy that would be needed to really offset or balance out the low end, it seems like there's just not quite enough. And what that does, aside from the signature not having good balance, some of the treble detail gets lost as well. So when I'm listening for those micro nuances in the treble, so cymbals, hi-hat detail, or higher stringed instruments, those details aren't cutting through as much as I would like. And that's kind of carrying through into the upper treble as well. I'm having some of the same issues, and it's just generally lacking in energy in the upper treble. Not that it doesn't have any upper treble, it does, but like the rest of the treble, the air, sparkle, and those micro details can feel a little overpowered and maybe can start to get a little lost in the mix. Now, as far as its technical ability, I would say it's about average. So it's not going to be able to compete with the likes of the Performer 5, Cara, Falcon Ultra, or even the Aviation, but I would say it's about neck and neck with the Orchestra Lite, the OH-10S, the BQ EYZ Winter and Wind, and all those have what I would consider to have about average technical performance for this price range. And by average, what I mean by that is detail is good for this price. It's not great, it's acceptable. The soundstage has decent width, but it doesn't necessarily have good forward depth and layering. Instrument imaging, while you can place each instrument within the sound field, it's not super focused and it can lack density. So instead of it feeling anchored in its position, it sounds more like it's kind of floating within the space. And again, that's very common, and I would say at this price range, you can't really expect a whole lot more than that. Again, you do have the IEMs that are standout. That being said, despite some of my nitpicks regarding its treble and the tuning, I actually otherwise quite like the Freya 2.0, and here's why. It kind of reminds me of a couple of my favorite V-shaped tuned IEMs, the Falcon Ultra and i600, not in terms of technical performance, of course, but in terms of its engagement or its ability to draw the listener in. But this is where things can become more personal and subjective, because what draws me in or engages me may not always be the same thing that engages you. And those engaging attributes can also vary from IEM to IEM. For example, the attributes that I love about the i600 are related to both its tuning and its technical performance, in that it has a very immersive sound field, so wide and deep soundstage, incredible instrument separation and imaging, excellent detail retrieval. So those things can draw me in, but it also has a very fun V-shaped tuning, probably one of my all-time favorite V-shaped tuned IEMs. But my point is, those are the types of things that can really pull me in and allow me to experience my music on a whole different level. Now, of course, that is a more expensive IEM again, but you get my point. Now, within the $200 to $300 price range, the Dunu Falcon Ultra also kind of has that effect on me. Not really quite to the degree of the IE600, but it is still an IEM that when I'm in the mood for something less neutral and want something maybe more engaging or captivating, the Falcon Ultra is one of the few IEMs in this price range that can actually offer that to one degree or another. But now I can add the Freya 2.0 to that list, which is super cool. So maybe it's not the most technical IEM, and maybe not even the best tuned if you're looking for something neutral, but it is a very well-tuned V-shaped IEM that has good enough detail retrieval and has a natural sounding mid-range. But I think the bass quality is what is adding that extra degree of enjoyment and is the attribute that I would credit mostly for providing that sense of engagement for me. There's just something physical and palpable about its presentation that many of the IEMs within this price range just can't produce. And just a side note, the Nano 2.0 and Urd also had that same type of draw for me as well. They were both very engaging IEMs. But here's the bottom line. I've connected with the Freya 2.0, and while it doesn't necessarily technically align with my normal criteria, it has found other ways to make me like it and engage me. And I've done my best to communicate those attributes. But here's the thing, I don't know if I can base a recommendation on that because of how subjective this aspect of the hobby is. So I think it's best for me to just let you decide if this would be a good fit for you based on the information I've provided. And hopefully it's enough information to base your decision off of. So that concludes my review of the Kinera Freya 2.0. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.